Welcome back to Epilepsy Moms. This is episode 5, part 3. We are going to be talking to Liz about her journey and asking her some questions. My name is Summer, and my son has generalized epilepsy with clonic-tonic and absent seizures.
I'm Liz. My daughter has focal epilepsy with focal seizures in her temporal lobe.
So let's get into it. I've listened to the other videos and have a few questions that I was wondering about. First of all, how long was your first visit in the hospital? That first time?
The very first time was a week long. Like I had said, she wanted to discharge us at 6 days. She did let us stay one more night to get her monitored. And so it was a week long.
So once they saw it was seizures, they were just having her stay to try to get them under control or to get testing done, or both?
They had, so after the seizure, or after the EEG, the following day did an MRI wanted to make sure that everything came back clear, make sure that there wasn't like a tumor that they needed to look for or anything. So fortunately that wasn't the case, but unfortunately it just ended up being a really long journey that, they wanted to make sure that the first doctor that had come in and said what she had, he said, we really want you to be, I'm not going to be comfortable sending you home. I really want you to be here 24 hours without a seizure before, we send you home to the world, and I was like, I appreciate that. Thank you. Because I'm scared out of my mind. I'm a parent with I have 2 kids. And at the time I was pregnant with my youngest, and it was just really scary. So that it ended up being a week that we were there, that they were just kind of monitoring her. And the 6th day when the doctor came in was the part that frustrated me, because I was explaining like, well, the first doctor didn't want us to go home, and why do you want us to go home? Like, it just didn't make sense. So we didn't agree, but she was like, well, if there is rescue medication. And I was like, I don't know how to administer rescue medication. I'm brand new to this whole thing. And that's actually when I looked on YouTube, I asked friends, I didn't know what to do. I didn't know where to go from there. I had no experience. I didn't know anything. And luckily I had my sister-in-law right by my side the whole entire time. She ended up coming up to the hospital. I was sobbing. I didn't know what to do. I didn't know where to start. Well, her son has epilepsy. And I think I've said that in previous videos. And I had asked her, I was just like, where do I even begin? What do I do? He's a few years older than my daughter is. So she was like, okay, you want to start here. I'm here for you. She was just a really big support to lean on while I was going through all of this in the beginning.
And that's what we've talked about in previous videos too, how important it is to have support. Like, you need to have people who can help you and you can talk to. And that's super important. And then when you left the hospital, was she just on Keppra, or had they added other things by then?
No, they hadn't added anything yet. She was just on Keppra. Now, I don't remember exactly the time frame of when they did Keppra and then trileptal at the same time. Later on, they had added the trileptal, but I don't remember. I want to say it was about 3 weeks later, because they wanted to see how well the Keppra was going to do. Mm-hmm. And I think like 3 weeks later, something like that, about a month later, they ended up putting her on trileptal. And then I think that worked for a little while, but then after that, it stopped working again. And it was just a mess. It was very roller coaster, up and down, of trying to make sure something worked, and then it would work for a minute and then it would come back. And then they added that 3rd one, and that's when she had the really dizzy spells, and it wasn't working out.
And again, this was what, 5 years ago, I think, when this all started. So it's been
2017 is when it started.
Yeah, it's been a while. So well, I think you kind of already talked about what side effects she was having, but most of those, I think, were from having so many drugs, right? Mm-hmm. Not.
So the side effect of the Keppra, which is a very normal side effect, very, very common. She would have anger. Like you see a normal 2-year-old, right? With some, like anger because she's not getting her way or, whatever. It is totally different. And Summer has talked about this in previous videos. The medication side effects are something fierce. Sometimes you can't control those behaviors, and trying to deal and parent them because they can't control it. But parenting a kiddo who has side effects from medications is a totally different journey than parenting a typical child who has no medications. So that was really hard because she's 2 years old and she was having these like outbursts and like very frustrated and angry, and trying to get her to take her medication was like horrible. I was like, get over here, like going crazy because I just wanted her to take it because I was so frustrated that it wasn't working, nothing was working. And she was having these these attitudes and these, being upset as a normal kid would, but then it's 10
like
times more.
Yeah. Like magnifying all those, the anger that you normally have becomes bigger. And it's
just hard. So infuriating. You feel defeated. That's literally what it is. You feel so defeated.
Yeah. And you just want to help. You just need them to take that medication so that they're better. But then if they're fighting you on that, it can be rough. It's a hard battle. So how did you find your new doctor? Was that word of mouth, or you Googled her? Or?
So I actually had a client, her daughter had seizures, and I had just recently come back to work from when she had been diagnosed. And she constantly kept saying, you should go to this doctor that I see. And it wasn't necessarily the doctor, but go to this place that I see, this office, and you're going to have to travel, but it's worth it. And she just swore by it. She's like, this is a great office to be at. You're going to love it. And I was like, okay. Well, I had heard lots of people traveling to this place. So I was like, all right, let's see if I can get an appointment. And I wasn't happy with her. Obviously, I wasn't happy with her doctor. So I talked to my husband. We made the deciding factor that we were going to travel. We were going to take that risk of traveling 5 hours every time we needed to. We were going to fork out that money. We were going to fork out what we needed to just to have a good doctor. And that's basically how we figured out that we were going to travel. We were going to go to this new office.
And I think that leads to advocating for your child. I mean, that's essentially what you were doing was, okay, we're going to decide, we're taking control here, and we're going to do something different, something that's hard, but we want to get out of this office we're currently in and see someone new. How did you get to that point of being comfortable just advocating and making those decisions instead of just doing what the doctors were saying?
My sister was my advocator and my husband's advocator. Basically, she just she was so, when she went to that appointment with me at the office, I was like just blown away by her upfrontness. She was just very forward, very to the point. She's like, I don't want to mess around. We're not here to mess around. You're not happy. Very to the point. And I was just blown away by how brave she was, and I realized by staying here, it was just making things worse. She was not on a good path. I was not getting her controlled. She would maybe be controlled for a month, and then it would come back. And I was so stressed out. I didn't know what to do. And talking to my client that had said to go travel to this place, I also kept talking to her about it. And so really it was a big part of my sister was how I learned to advocate. She would talk to me about, you need to stand up because, your husband's going to follow your lead. And I just kind of, after traveling to the new doctor, I felt like I had to still advocate, but it was a lot less because my doctor started advocating for her. So yes, I will call her or message her on, my chart and be like, hey, I'm really struggling. This is what I want to have done. How can we administer that? How can we do this? And that, my husband just constantly is just a support. He just follows me, and he'll have questions, but he'll just like with me, he knows that he can ask the doctor and she'll tell him, and she'll break it down for us because she wants to advocate for my daughter.
That's great. That's wonderful to find a doctor who's coming alongside you with their wisdom and knowledge to help you, rather than just sitting back and just telling you, well, try this, try that.
Yeah.
So that's amazing. And you do have to do that. I mean, you have to find somebody who's going to really help you and help your child. What do you wish that you had known then that you know now?
In the beginning, honestly, it's not something you could have done because you don't know what's going to happen. I wish I knew more about it. I wish I had known more about epilepsy. And that's why I think that this is such a great channel to start, because anyone can watch it. I wish that I had had more knowledge about it. And I also wish in the beginning I could have advocated better. So those are the two things that I wanted to have, but didn't have. Right. And if I could ever redo it, those are the two things that I would redo.
Yeah, those are big things that are, important in this. So then I just had a couple questions about your daughter. Like, how do you guys deal with getting blood work? And does she know when she's having a seizure? Does she get an aura, and does she remember what's happening?
So I'll go to the blood draw first. The blood draw is not, so here in our hometown, it's not easy. They don't do a great job with kids. I haven't found one that does a great job with kids, at least. They do a lot of adults, right? Most adults have to get the blood draws. I'm sure there's great ones around. I just haven't found them. So honestly, that is a little harder. But the place that we travel to, they do a great job because they're a children's hospital. So they do a great job at making sure that they're quick. I mean, even for IVs, they're very fast at getting them in. And it hasn't really been a big struggle. And so she's not very scared going into it. She knows, like, she'll kind of get that, like, oh, I'm scared. And I'm like, oh no, this is quick. This is easy. Like, this is the easy part. They're not going to leave it in for very long. It goes in and it comes right out. Like, they're done within seconds. So, I always try to get it done there if I have to get blood draws, because here it can be messy. It can be very panicky. And then I'm sure rewards would work, by the way. I think I've done that in the past. One time was, let's go get ice cream. If you do this, let's go get ice cream. But I don't know. My daughter's not very one to get, she doesn't do the whole bribery thing very well. So what was the other question?
So for the seizures, does she remember them? Does she have an aura?
So for that, actually, just recently, we have been over at our doctor's office in August, and she had asked my daughter, what do you feel? Can you tell me a story about your seizures? And that was really interesting because I'd never heard of it like that. Like, I'd never heard, tell me a story about it. So she had said, she kind of helped her kind of start it. Like, when I have a seizure, I see this, or I feel this. So it kind of helped her, kind of bring her to what she feels or sees. And so, no, she does not see much, or she knows I'm there. She always says, even yesterday, I asked her and I said, do you know that I'm there? And she goes, I know. I can sometimes see you're there, but sometimes I'm scared. And I said, well, why are you scared? And she goes, I don't know. I'm just scared. And I said, is it scary because you can feel your face doing things that you can't control? And she says, yes, I can't control it. And I said, I know. So is that what you're scared of? Or are you scared for some other reason? And she said, no, mostly scared because I don't know. I can't make it stop. And I said, okay. And so she had kind of mentioned that a little bit to her doctor too, when she was, talking to her. And then she mentioned that she sees black sometimes. She says, sometimes it's black and sometimes it's not. And I said, black, like you're seeing. So she sees black. She says, sometimes I see black and sometimes I don't. Sometimes I can see you and sometimes I can't. And I was like, okay. I mean, it was really interesting. So the doctor actually wondered if it's closer to her optic nerve, and which is farther in the brain. It's not on the outside of the brain. So it kind of clicked a little bit for the doctor, and the doctor, is also like, well, what do we do now? Like that's it. It's hard because she's still so young, but actually they did say that 6-7 years old is a pretty typical age to where they know that they're starting to have seizures. They can identify the seizure when they're having one. Even if they're sleeping, most of the time they can identify that they had a seizure, because something either stops or goes wrong, or they get hurt, or they can feel it, or whatever. And my daughter started calling them dreams. So then I had to start asking her, okay, was it a seizure dream or was it a bad dream from a nightmare? And then she can, because she calls them her dreams.
Wow.
And I'm like, because she has them when she's sleeping all the time. So
wow.
Yeah,
that's very interesting. And does she, so she does know when she's gonna have one? Does she feel it like coming on?
She used to look at me, do that weird, that look at me kind of thing. She doesn't do that anymore. So I don't know if she can feel it coming on anymore. I don't know if she's ever been able to pinpoint it again. Maybe when she was younger, because it was so new, she knew something was wrong and she was looking at me for like comfort.
Right.
And now she's just so used to it that she's like, oh, here I go. I don't know.
Yeah.
You can normally see it. Like if it's if it's at night, she can't probably feel it come on because she's sleeping.
Right.
But in the daytime, she'll look at me and do that sour face, but she can't really tell me before she starts doing her sour face. Because she'll kind of do this like kind of sour, like she's eating a lemon kind of thing. And her mouth will clench.
Well, at one point in your story, you were saying she did go off medications for a week to go in the hospital and see if they wanted to do more testing for surgery. What was that like? Did she start having more? Was it?
Unfortunately, Murphy's Law. You go to the hospital and you're off your medication, you're waiting for something to happen, and then it never happens. And you're sitting there wondering, why did we even come? Why did we even bother? So that's kind of how I felt. I was like, we just went through getting her, titrating all her medication, getting her completely off of everything. She was on 2 meds at the time. And I thought for sure that she was going to start having seizures. And she'd had, I think, a couple, but not, and it takes 3 days for your body to
like get it all
basically
out.
Be off your medication. It took her, and I don't know if this is because she had so much built up in her system, because she's been on meds for so long, but it took her, so the whole week we were there, she did not have a single seizure.
Wow.
Not a single seizure, a whole week of no medication. And she had even been off her medication 3 days prior to that week. And there was nothing.
Wow.
And I was just so frustrated. But, I asked the doctor at that time, I was like, my husband and I are wondering why you want to put her back on medication to come home if we're not getting our results.
Right. If she's not having them,
why? Yeah, she's not having them. Why are we putting her on medication? Is she healed? Like, what's going on, when she was like, there's still seizure activity. There's not a seizure. A seizure didn't pop out, but she still has the activity going on. And I was like, okay, what does that mean? What is that? What is that going to show? And she goes, we need more time. Basically, we need more time. And I said, well, again, I'm not going to put her on medications if she's not having seizures. And my sister agreed. Lots of people that I had talked to about this agreed with how my husband and I felt. And she goes, all right, let's, her and I literally, and she called me 10 o'clock at night. We were in the hospital. It was amazing. And so she goes, you know what? You're right. Let's put her on a very, 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 very low dose of medication, because she was on a really high dose of meds. She goes, let's put her on just a smidge just to get you out of the hospital, get you home. That way she's not having tons of seizures on your way home. And see where she goes. If she starts having seizures on your way home, drive back, come right back. Or if she starts having, and she's like, we'll get you admitted to the ER, just come back. If you get home and, go to your home hospital and, we'll work from there, kind of thing. We'll get an EEG just to get them showing. And I was like, okay, that sounds good. It was a low dose, enough to just get us home, so she's not having a zillion on our way home randomly. So she ended up not having any on our way home either. My sister actually flew to where we were so she could drive home with me to make sure that she wasn't going to have any, and I wasn't driving by myself with her. And so I was just like, all right, where do we go from here? And it ended up being another 2 weeks that she didn't have another seizure. And then they started. And then we ended up we went back, got an EEG done. And that was that. So it was kind of weird, the fact that she just didn't have any, but sometimes it takes a little while. And for her, it just took a little bit longer. And then she started having, and then we were like, okay, now we got to get her back on some medications because they're coming back. We need to get her back on meds, because we're not trying to completely, have them come back. We only need to see a few to figure out where exactly, because medications can actually alter seizures. It can actually alter where they see it also. So medications, can kind of mask things. So when you're having an EEG with meds and an EEG without meds, it can almost be in different locations, if that makes sense. Not completely. It's not like it's coming from one side to the next side. It's more of it can just be bigger, or it can be smaller.
Interesting.
So they never knew that it was hidden.
Okay. So when she started having them again, was that I just can't imagine how sad that must have felt, to be oh, she hasn't had them for 2 weeks. I feel every day you would get more hopeful. They're no, they're going to go away. And then boom, they're back.
It was, again, you just reach out for your support. You get your husband, your spouse, you get family involved, because it is a tough time, because, we knew that she needed to have them for answers for surgery. We knew that was going to be a thing, but at the same time, we don't want her to.
Right.
You don't want her to have a seizure, but to get something bigger that we needed or wanted to happen, like surgery, we had to have seizures without medication to see exactly where they're coming from. It's one of those moments of there's no word for it. I don't even, it sucks.
And I think that brings us back to the grieving process, which we've talked about before. But I think, and you've said before, you've had 2 grieving processes. One was finding out she has epilepsy, and then again, finding out you can't have surgery.
The second grieving process was actually a lot bigger. I was pretty emotional about it. I never went through the anger part of it, but I was very emotional about it. And it took my cousin actually explaining to me hey, you're going through grief. This is a grieving process. And that to me opened my eyes, and I was like, you're completely right. And then that's when I realized I have had 2 grievings. I have had that initial diagnosis of a grieving when my sister-in-law was there next to me, holding my hand, telling me it was going to be okay, telling me that, you know, she's going to help me get through this. And just having her support at that moment with me and my husband, just sitting here like dumbfounded, like, what do we even begin with? How do we start this? And I did end up going through almost every single grieving process in that very beginning. You know, weeks back, you had talked about, I think, what was there, 7 ways of grief.
Mm-hmm. Yes.
I think I went through all 7. Like that was rough. And so remembering like, oh, that was a grieving thing. And now I'm grieving on a whole different level. This is more of like, I'm just so, again, defeated. I thought that I had this thing that we were going to be able to fix her, and now we can't. Yeah. Because you just want to fix your child. You want to make it better.
Yeah. Yeah.
So it is a grief. It is a grieving thing.
And is there anything you would have done differently looking back?
So, I mean, honestly, if I had known more, like I had said previously, like if I knew about epilepsy more, if I knew about seizures more, or what they could look like, or if I knew about what my sister-in-law had gone through more, I wouldn't have been, it was like I was sheltered. So I didn't understand. I didn't know things. And then when it happened, I just waved it off, you know? So if I had known things, if I had known that there could be different ways of having seizures, different types of seizures, I would have probably taken her to the doctor sooner.
Right.
I would have been like, something's different, something's off, you know, this is what she was doing, you know, taking her to the PCP, her primary physician, and just saying, what do I do? What is this? What's happening? You know, and she could have referred me, you know, to the doctor, or, you know, it could have maybe started this process sooner. But honestly, I really have a firm belief in God's timing. So it all happened, and you can't go back, and you can't wish anything differently than what's already happened. So it has now taught me so much now that I can show others and advocate for others, or I can bring awareness to other people so that if it happens to their child, they have a plan. They know what to do. You know, I've had lots of people contact me and be like, how did you know that your daughter was having seizures? I think my child's having seizures. Or, you know, my child's doing this really weird thing. Is this normal? You know, is this something that can be normal? And now that I've had 2 children that have had seizures, I can be like, well, this is kind of what my son did for his one. And this is what my daughter did. And she is an epileptic. So I have 2 stories I can kind of go off of. So it's brought awareness to other people, which is a good thing.
And that's the reason for our channel, to help and support, and just let you guys know what to do if you're seeing these things and what it's like, so that you know what to look for. And comment below if you guys have any other questions for Liz. I know she would be happy to answer any other questions.
You can also email us.
And next week, I will tell my story.
So your story's not over.
Your story's just begun.